Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Let me ask you a question. What if the way you're eating isn't the problem, but the way your nervous system feels when you eat is? Hey, y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the Blog Cabin to chat about life. And because it's Women's History Month, we are chatting with another woman, an author, and she's also a nutritionist as well. She has a whole list behind her name. But before we get into introducing Meg, I want to go with a woman's quote. This is by Grace Hopper. She's a computer scientist and a rear admiral. And she says the most dangerous phrase is, "We've always done it this way." And I think that's very important, Meg, what we're talking about today. We're talking about This Is Your Body on Trauma, her book. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. It was not a very, what would I say, easy, light read. You had to dissect it in different things. So welcome to the show, Meg, and tell us a little about yourself before we start talking about your book.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. You know, professionally, I work as an LDN, licensed dietitian nutritionist who specializes in trauma and mental health. And I really got here myself from my own. I was diagnosed with Crohn's about 13, 14 years ago. And I really felt like so much of that diagnosis came from my own experience of stress and trauma. And so I think it was 2 or 3 months after my diagnosis, I was back in school getting a whole new degree, and I have been doing this ever since, and I love it.
Yeah, what made you decide to write the book, This Is Your Body on Trauma? Because honestly, a lot of people think that what we eat, what we feel our body is important, but they don't realize that it's trauma too, is what we're taking in and how our body is affected by what we eat.
Yeah, I think especially, so I was doing mental health nutrition before that was popular. It's starting to become popular, but you know, I've been in this business at this point long enough to have watched the development of it. And as I listen to a lot of people who talk and publish and think about mental health nutrition, there's a gap. And the gap that I see is so many people are talking about what to eat, but I actually think that how to eat is equally as important, if not maybe more important than what you're actually putting on your plate. So that's really what I wanted to highlight was, you know, some of the ways in which if we have experienced a lot of stress or trauma that we might find it difficult to engage with food, and what can we do in those scenarios.
So people engaging with food, like with trauma and mental health, and we're going through a lot, and stress eating and everything, that's nothing new. But this approach is sort of like you said, now it's newer. People you've known about it for years, but now people are starting to notice it. Why do you think they're starting to notice it now?
That's a great question. You know, I think it really comes from, you know, a lot of people realizing that the current way that we look at mental health here in the US is maybe insufficient. You might be surprised to know that probably 80 to 90% of my clients are mental health therapists, because it's not just about the psychosocial piece. There's also a biological piece that you know, food plays into as to, you know, how we perceive stress and how our mood is. And so it really is a very holistic approach to mental health that we're finally starting to be aware of.
And you just said that a lot of your clients are mental health therapists.
Yeah.
What made them finally come to you and say, hey, we need to start researching it. We need to start working on this?
Yeah. You know, I think, again, it's that piece that I know all the tricks. I know all the tools. I have a huge toolbox coming from therapy world. I'm still depressed. I'm still anxious. I still am really struggling with food. And it happens so frequently. I have other colleagues that also specialize in mental health nutrition, and the majority of their clients are therapists. I think therapists are the kind of the first group to really recognize that there's a gap, and potentially this is one way to fill that gap of support.
So when someone comes to you, what do you first look at when you look at, okay, let's look at your nutrition, let's look at trying to heal your gut, because you talk about gut microbiomes as well in the book, but how to heal, and do they do a food log? How do they go about doing that? How do you go about guiding them?
That's a great question. You know what? I have a feeling that every single listener is going to assume that I'm going to do some sort of a food log and I'm going to do calculations. That's not the first thing I do. The first thing I try to understand is what's going well with food. Because the nutrition profession, I have beef with our profession. You know, we're taught to look for the gaps, to look for the insufficiencies, to look for the problems. And I really think if we just kind of, at least initially, look at what's actually going well, because there's always something that's going well, and then figure out how we can build from that, that really helps us address some of those places where we're not maybe getting what we need. But to answer more clinically, I have an assessment protocol in my head that I go through with each client, where we look at the food that they're eating and we try and think through, you know, what nutrition are you getting? What nutrition aren't you getting? Macronutrients, micronutrients, and other. And then we look at any inflammation that they're experiencing, any gut issues. And then finally, you know, where is there stress, and is there anything we can do to support the stress response? And all of that kind of together brings a menu of options that we explore.
I know a lot of people are thinking, well, because if I go to a nutritionist and they're going to, you know, tell me I can't have this, I can't have that, I can't have this. And you're not about denying, because I remember reading in the book about the little boy that had cancer, and his dad took him to Five Guys because that's what he wanted after he had his chemo. And he was like, and people are like, I can't believe you took him to Five Guys. So no, it's important that he was getting the nutrition and not what he was eating. And I think a lot of people, that's the reason why they're so backed up about going to nutritionists. They get their backs up because they feel like you're going to tell me what I can't have. I can't have ice cream. I can't have this. I can't have that. And I'm sure that, and you're smiling, so I'm sure that's not the case.
No, it's not the case, but it is ubiquitous. Generally speaking, when somebody comes for a first session, we ask, hey, you know, what did you eat yesterday, as a way to get to know them, a way to understand a little bit. And just about everybody says one of two things. Either they say, oh, I had pizza and beer last night, or they say whatever they're going to say, whatever they ate, but it's just filled with all these, oh, and I shouldn't have done this, and oh, you're going to judge me for this. And it's just amazing to me how much shame and judgment people have about their own food behaviors that I don't want to say that no nutrition provider has, but most of us really do not have that kind of perspective. We're really looking to see how we can help.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people need to realize that it's not about, you know, you're talking about healing the whole person, not just healing the mentally, the physically, emotionally, and a lot of that goes into what we're eating.
For sure. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you suggest for the person that's going into the first time and say, okay, I want to feel better, period?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, if you're going to a provider to talk about nutrition, there's a couple things you should really be curious about. Being aware of how you want to feel, I think, is really important. It's my job working in the nutrition field to hear you say, I want to be less depressed, and convert that into what is our approach going to be via food. I want to hear you say, I want to feel less depressed, or I want to feel more focused, or, you know, I have just been through the horrors that are going on and I just can barely keep my head on straight. Okay, I understand what that means nutritionally, but kind of being able to take that objective, that goal, and convert it into what does that mean? How do you want to feel? That's helpful for us.
So have you ever had a client that they come in and they're like, okay, I know you're going to tell me I can't have this, this, and this. I'm just here because somebody told me I had to come, and I'm just here just to take up space. And at the end, they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better because they followed your protocol.
100% of the time. And usually I will call that out the second I hear it. And my famous phrase is, wow, your brain is telling you a lot of stories about this. This is super interesting. Like, where did your brain pick up these notions? You know, because that's not the approach that we're going to take here. Shame doesn't work. We actually know it's an evidence-based approach. Shame doesn't work. So as much as we can, you know, really have that presence with food, that's really what we're aiming for.
So, what do you suggest when people are looking for a nutritionist? What do you suggest that they look for in a nutritionist? Because
Mhm.
obviously, there are going to be some that are going to be like almost like a trainer where they're dictating, you have to eat this and this and
Yeah.
this.
And there are some people for whom that is a very good approach. There's always somebody for you out there. And maybe that's the best piece of advice. I don't work well when I get a client that says, tell me exactly what to do. I'm like, I don't know what to do with you. Go see somebody else. But really trying to match your own style with the provider in front of you. I think that is really important. So you can just ask questions. What does goal setting look like for you? I hate the word accountability, but what does accountability look like? And just see what they have to say.
Yeah, because I think there are different styles that match up against each other, and there's different types of people that will butt heads with each other. So you have to feel comfortable, because basically you're burying your whole life, because a
Yeah.
lot of people, there's that shame around food, and you're like, oh, I ate a whole tub of ice cream last night without realizing it. Of course that's not good for you, but to actually admit it and then feel like you're being judged because you did it.
Yeah, and absolutely. We just do not want to, I hope really, really never to show judgment when people come and talk about their food. But that is also, as you're saying, why that match is really important. Because there are instances where a client comes in. I had a client one time. So everybody has a food that they don't like. I have a really visceral reaction to mine. Mine is squid ink pasta. So it's the pasta that is dyed with squid ink. It is black. And exactly, thank you. Exactly. That is exactly the face that I make. And so I had a client that it was one of her favorite foods, and I had to poker face. We were working the poker face overtime. And you know what, Melissa, I'm so sorry. My dog was in here with me, and now my husband is making lunch. I'm just going to let her out. Forgive me.
Okay.
Has to be the same time every day.
Wow. There you go. Your nutritionist and your dog's lunch has to be at the same time every day.
She tells me, she says, we are only going to do it this way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's so funny that you're a nutritionist and your dog is telling you what time she wants to eat.
My dog rules me. She absolutely rules me. And you know what? It's actually a good piece of advice, because I think some of our challenges with food, and of course our lives are busy, but some of our challenges with food is that there's no regularity, there's no rhythm, in our modern lives. And so my dog makes efforts to remind me all the time that maybe I should have some regularity.
I love that. We got to take a brief commercial break, but we'll be right back after, if I can find it. Where'd it go? Right back after that.
When cancer crashed into my life, it tried to take everything: my health, my career, even my joy. But I refused to let it. Instead, I discovered something powerful: that laughter and hope and small moments of joy could be just as powerful as any prescription. I've worn many hats: entrepreneur, consultant, speaker, and most importantly, mom. But the role I never expected: cancer thriver. And I realized that my story isn't just mine. It's something that others needed too. My book, Finding Hope and Joy in Cancer, is part survival guide, part pep talk, and yes, even part comedy special for your soul. It's raw, it's real, it's filled with wisdom and stories and laughs that helped carry me through treatment and beyond. Over the years, I've built companies and communities, but this mission is different. It's about building resilience, one story at a time. My mission is simple. Hope, it's not optional. It's essential. And joy, it's waiting for you, even in the hardest chapters of your life. I'm Amanda Gunville, speaker, author, and cancer thriver. And I'm here to talk about humor, resilience, and what it really takes to find joy when life feels impossible.
And we are back with Meg talking about This Is Your Body on Trauma, her book, and it is How to Nourish Safety, Resilience, and Connection with Polyvagal Informed Nutrition. Now, what that big word, polyvagal informed, tell me a little bit about what that means.
If I were to just try and describe it in a sentence, it would be understanding how our nervous system really impacts our sense of safety or danger and how that shows up with our food. I have a feeling everybody can probably identify at some point in their lives where maybe they had to give a speech in front of class, or they had to go into some sort of an environment where their stomach felt tight or nauseous, or they felt a little sick to their stomach because of the anxiety. That's a great example of how our nervous system can impact our ability to eat. It's not the only example, but it's a pretty ubiquitous one.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
tell us ways that the nervous system impacts our ability to eat.
Yeah. So, probably the most important, if I really were to drill it down, is that when we do not feel safe, when we do not feel present, grounded, regulated, we don't have full access to choice. So when we think about, somebody who's just been through something, I just lost my brother about a month and a half ago. There were times where I just wasn't hungry at all. Like, not hungry at all. And I didn't quite have the capacity to say, let me eat anyway. I didn't have the mental capacity. It just wasn't there. And so the choice piece was difficult. And also it can be difficult when we have kind of too much energy in our systems. I was just talking with a woman this morning that has 3 boys that are all in baseball. They all have different schedules, and then they all have instrument lessons. And I'm just imagining her schedule, and she's talking about how difficult dinner is because there's so much kind of frantic energy that slowing down and figuring out what to eat is really hard. So it shows up differently for different people in different times, but those are some good examples.
So 2 things off of that. One, I am so sorry for the loss of your brother. How are you doing now?
It comes in waves. I'm sure anybody who's gone through grief, it comes in waves. That's what I got.
And then number 2 with the mom, because I know there's a lot of moms that are feeling what that same mom that you were just talking about, and how, with all the practices, how do we go about trying to figure out what to eat, when to eat? How did you come up with a plan for her?
Yeah. So for me, it's not necessarily a plan, because a plan, when I think about like New Year's resolutions as an example, oh my gosh, it's January 1st and forevermore, I'm going to do XYZ around food. And that never works because life gets lifing, and every single day in a lot of our lives is different. So what I come up with clients is a toolkit. So a toolkit of resources. One of the pieces that we were talking about this morning with this woman that I was talking about was understanding where she has time. So if she only has time in the morning, every Tuesday morning because of practice and lessons, that's going to be a crockpot day. If she only has time in the evening, that's not going to be a crockpot day. That's going to be like a sheet pan meal or meal delivery. And so we build these toolkits over time so that, regardless of what comes, we have the ability to pivot and still have a way to show up for ourselves with food.
I agree with that, because I do have a plan. I have always a couple of quick and easy meals in my freezer that I can just take out on really busy days. Or if I know that, hey, I'm going to be doing interviews all day long, I'm going to put a crock pot, I'm going to put chicken in the crock pot, do it some kind of way, and have it ready by the time dinner comes around.
Absolutely. That's great examples of kind of have that plan, have in advance, because if you have time, you can make something, from scratch. And if you don't, hey, you're still getting yourself fed in a way that feels good.
Yeah, for sure. So you have your book there with you. Will you read part of your book for us?
Sure. The part that I'm going to read is the first part of chapter 8. And the reason that I really wanted to read this is because I've heard from people that this really reflects their experiences pretty well. So let's do that. Jan was a 55-year-old woman on a mission. She wanted to successfully transition to her new job and to lessen the unremitting, unpredictable symptoms of diarrhea that had flared since she started the position. She'd recently left a long-term job as the pastor at a church she loved because she felt the need for a new challenge. Now, she was exploring her options and chose to fill in temporarily at another church that was between pastors. Her new placement was really tough. The church's congregation had asked the previous pastor to leave, and when Jan arrived, there was a ton of conflict and not a lot of trust. To make matters worse, Jan also had a 2-hour commute each way, and she would often stay over at the church-owned apartment most nights. Prior to this new role, Jan had infrequent gut symptoms, experiencing occasional reflux and bloating once a month after she ate too much spicy food. These gut symptoms were so infrequent that she never bothered to share them with her doctor and self-treated by taking an antacid. Now, however, Jan was dealing with reflux nearly every time she ate and also had bowel urgency and diarrhea after eating, resulting in her feeling scared to eat in case she wasn't able to make it to the bathroom in time. Disaster pants, indeed. As you can imagine, eating with congregants is a pretty common symptom or part of the job, and Jan really worried that she was offending people due to her inability to eat without experiencing symptoms. Jan was experiencing a special type of neuroception that I like to call gut feelings, meaning that her feelings of anxiety and overwhelm were expressing themselves through her gut. And in turn, these gut feelings were increasing her anxiety and causing her to worry every time she left the house. It became a feedback loop where her anxiety would cause more gut symptoms, and then the gut symptoms would cause more anxiety again and again.
So let's talk about the gut-brain connection, because I think now it seems like that's the buzzword. Your gut your microbiomes in your gut. Everybody's talking about that now, and it's been around forever. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So really that connection between the brain and the gut, we used to, again, you've experienced this in your life when you go and had to give a speech at school. Those bubbles in your stomach, those butterflies, that is the gut-brain connection, right? Those are sensations you're experiencing in your gut that your brain is interpreting as anxiety. And we're becoming more and more aware how frequently this happens, how frequently messages of safety or danger that are happening in the gut travel to the brain and the rest of the body. And all of a sudden we have this feedback loop that makes us think that, oh my gosh, it's never going to go away. Yeah.
Let's talk about certain times of life. Like teenagers, of course, we need a little bit more nutrition, but once you hit perimenopause and menopause in women, the nutrition needs to change a little bit because you need to supplement some of the things that you don't have in your body anymore, correct?
Yeah, there's definitely things that when we age, I'm in perimenopause myself right now, so there's definitely things that we need to pay more attention to. I think, as we get older, there's vitamins and minerals, like our ability to absorb B12 starts going once we hit 40. But also just really paying attention to protein, which is a big buzzword, but also just fruit, vegetable, color. All that stuff is important as we go through perimenopause and menopause.
Okay, so what on the flip side, what should men do for the men that are listening, as they get older? What should they look at and concentrate on? Same things or a little bit different?
Well, that's an excellent question. If I were to generalize, I would say generally speaking, none of us get enough fiber. We know that colon cancer rates are going up, but also fiber is what feeds that microbiome. So men, women, everybody, nobody gets enough fiber. I think that's pretty ubiquitous. A lot of people don't get enough color. So the color in fruit or vegetables, polyphenols. And when we look at mood, it really does appear that, at least in part, color helps us feel better. So I think those are pretty universal things. And then beyond that, we'd have to get into specifics.
Yeah. So when you're talking about color with fruits and vegetables, what colors are you looking at? Because I know they're all colored, but so they know when they go to the grocery store, or they go to the fruit stand, or they go to the vegetable stand, what should they get? What should they look for?
Preferably we want a little bit of a rainbow. We want more than just one color because the colors have different components in them. The reds in the carrots have carotenoids in them. The purples and blues have components that are really good for our brains. So preferably it's a situation where you get a lot of colors. Now, I will tell you, I am generally not the person to go to the grocery store and try and get a fruit or vegetable of every color to put in my cart. That seems like a lot of work to me.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will just go to the salad bar, and if I notice that I haven't had anything purple for a little bit, I'll just get a half cup of purple cabbage and I'll add it to my salads, or I'll add it to something. And sometimes it's so light that they can't even pick it up on the scanners. But that's a great way to just get a little bit of vegetables. So if you're not going to eat the whole thing of celery, just get a little bit and it'll be cheaper and easier and you won't waste.
And I love what you just said about how if you notice that you haven't eaten anything purple, that you will go and grab something off the salad bar, because you're making a conscious effort of noticing what you're eating. You're not actually writing down, and you're not actually like, oh my gosh, I have so many calories, this, that, and the other. No, you're just making a conscious effort to just look at your plate and say, you know what? Maybe I should choose the salad because I haven't had a lot of leafy greens lately. Or I should have that red apple because I want an apple, or the orange melon or watermelon, something with that effect, that I haven't had a lot of this color of fruit or vegetables lately.
I think sometimes our plates look really beige. There's definitely times where you kind of look at your plate. I will say my plate last night looked a little beige. My husband, I was at an event late, so he made hamburgers and then he made roasted potatoes. And I was kind of looking at it, and it was delicious. It both was delicious and looked delicious, but it was really beige. And so I made sure that today I'm just eating more fruit and vegetables.
And then, for instance, with the hamburger as well, you can always top off a hamburger with a piece of lettuce, some lettuce, and tomatoes. It's that simple of a fix. You really don't have to really think about what you're putting on. You just have to notice the amounts that you're putting.
Yeah, it really is. I think that concept of adding in for many people is really important versus let me eliminate this. That's not something that's sustainable for a lot of people. So thinking about how could I add in fiber or how could I add in color, that's a great place to start.
Now, I know a lot, and I think you even mentioned in the book about gluten sensitivities, about people who have gluten sensitivities. It seems like that's coming out more often too. What do you think that is?
Yeah, it can happen with people, and a lot of people have different theories as to why. I grew up in a family, my mom was diagnosed with celiac when I was 12. This was in the dark ages. This was a long time ago. And so watching, there was no gluten-free products back then, and now it's ubiquitous. The thing that I would say, though, is I hope people use just a little bit of caution. And if they think they're sensitive to gluten, go into it with a little bit of a detective hat on. Because sometimes people think they're sensitive to gluten, and actually they just are eating a lot of fiber or more than their body can handle. Or they think they're sensitive to gluten, and actually they're being triggered by a FODMAP, which is a type of carbohydrate that some people react to. So there's a little bit of experimentation whenever somebody comes into my office and thinks they are reacting. We go through a little bit of an experiment to see, what are we actually reacting to? Because we want to restrict the least foods that we can restrict. A diverse diet is, in almost all cases, the healthiest diet.
I love that, because you're not taking away or restricting. You're trying to figure out a plan that everybody can be happy about. And I think a lot of people, when they think about, I'm going to a nutritionist, they're thinking that they're going to tell me I can't have this, I can't have that, I can't what you can't have. And what you're saying is you're working with them so that they can have their favorite foods if they want, but not in moderation, not like eat a whole piece of cake. I mean, a whole cake by yourself, that's the no anyways, but just having that thing in moderation.
Well, I'll give you a great example. This is actually my business partner's example, but I must admit I get a lot of pleasure from it. So she had a client coming in who was having really unrelenting diarrhea. And she kept seeing watermelon on her client's diet diary. And so eventually she was like, so, talk to me about how much watermelon you're eating. The client was eating an entire watermelon a day, and not a personal sized watermelon, like a watermelon, right?
Wow.
And that's what was causing the diarrhea. And so, back to that idea that we're probably not going to say never eat watermelon. That's a crazy thing to say. But if we can see direct impact of like when you eat a large watermelon and you get diarrhea, what would happen if you would just maybe eat a personal size watermelon? Would you still get the same results? That's really more what we're trying to do.
Well, I can't even imagine eating a whole watermelon by myself, but she had one every day.
Every day. I mean, blessings. We hear this every once in a while. We had another one of my interns had another client recently who didn't like the taste of food when it was refrigerated. So she would just, after making it, just leave food out and eat it 24 to 48 hours later and had a lot of diarrhea. And we're like, well, let's learn about food poisoning.
Wow.
Yeah.
We have some funny quirks when it comes about food, don't we?
We all do. We all do. And that's actually what makes my job so fun, is that there's no judgment. There's just people's, I do judge my husband. He cuts butter sticks when you have to do like a half a stick of butter. He cuts them lengthwise, not halfway. So I do judge him, but I don't judge anybody else who does that.
I've never heard it done like that.
The first time I saw it, I was like, what is happening here? There's literally cut marks. There's cut marks. But
I just can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
There's so many other good stories in this book. I love the part where at the very beginning you said it wasn't nutrition that took pain away. Instead, by calming the nervous system's internal alarm system, it gave people just enough capacity to hold the hard things without becoming overwhelmed. And I think that's important because, we have to calm our nervous system down. So what kind of fruits or what kind of foods should we use to calm our nervous system down?
I'm going to give you the same answers. Isn't this great? When I think about what really helps our nervous system, in well-balanced meals regularly, with lots of fiber, with lots of color. Woo, we're there. That's it. There's the prescription. That is what it is. We have veered as a society so far from that. I mean, I do it too. I eat standing over my sink. I eat in the car on the way to places. There are days where we just have a pretzel and think that's lunch. But as much as we can send ourselves signals through food of safety, through regular well-balanced meals or fiber or color or good fats, protein, that's really what helps.
So what would you say to the person that says, my body does not digest fiber very well?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It is usually a learning curve. There's a lot of people's bodies who do not digest fiber really well because they've tried to go from 0 to 60 miles per hour. Yep. I had a gentleman once who we were talking about just very slowly adding 1 serving of fruit or vegetables a day. And he came back the next week, and his wife happened to have joined him, but he was my client. He came back the next week and he's like, Meg, I have horrible constipation. And I'm asking what he did. Well, the dude went from eating no vegetables or fruit to eating 9 servings a day. And his wife is there on the couch, like whacking him going, I told you. So the supersize thing is not smart for a lot of us. But really, if you're having trouble with fiber, this is a place where I think it's worth seeing somebody and doing some experiments to see what can you tolerate, what is challenging, and what might be our ramp up look. What might that look like?
Well, you've given us so much to think about. I mean, our time is almost up, which I hate because I think I could talk about this all day long because it really opened my eyes. You never thought of the connection with food and your body on trauma. There's a person that I follow on social media that she talks about now. They only eat fresh. They have fresh meat. They're having I think it's the carnivore diet. But in your book, you even say, don't go on one diet. Just don't do the diet plans. Do what feels right for your body.
It very frequently doesn't work. There is, I think a lot of people, I have seen a lot of people, I myself have done this. You go on social media and you hear somebody is having these amazing results and you think, oh, I would have those same results if I did that thing. And I don't know how often that's actually realistically the case. So, the questions that I always ask people when they think about things going on a particular diet is really, really honestly, does it feel sustainable? Because if it's not sustainable, what is the point?
Yeah.
There might be times where we have to do a short-term elimination to do something, but generally speaking, like if it's not sustainable, what's the point? And then is it accessible? Is it something you can actually put into your life? Because if it isn't, again, what's the point?
Yeah, for sure. And I know a lot of people talk about the FDA here in America is not as hard as people in Europe, where European countries, there are things already banned over there that you can't use in the food. But like take, for instance, the candy Skittles, it's banned over in Europe. But here, you see people eating it all the time. And yet there's certain things in Skittles that people like, it's bad for you, but people still eat it. So let's talk about that the restrictions of where it's in Europe and here, because I think it's really funny, and the chemicals that are in our food.
It's actually, I think, is pretty interesting to think about that. And we really have to look at, I think there's a little bit of fear mongering that the press does to us. I have beef with the media. And my beef with the media is, sometimes they will look at these studies that say, if you eat 10,000 grams of this, it's going to cause cancer. And how much is in that food? It's barely anything. Taking all of that with a grain of salt and being aware that, I can promise you, if you only eat Skittles, we are going to have some protein deficiency real quick.
Yeah.
But nothing is designed to be our only food. And so really just getting some calm about it, because even if you start going, oh my gosh, I can't eat this, I can't eat that, I can't eat that, now all of a sudden our nervous system is feeling very activated. So just being aware that, again, we're going to go back to like well-balanced meals. And then if you want some Skittles, hey, you do you.
I love that. Hey, you do you. Now, our time is almost up. Is there one last little thing that either you want to reiterate, or something we talked about before, or something we haven't talked about that you want to talk about? The floor is yours before we talk about where people can find your book and where they can find you.
Yeah, I think the thing that I actually would love to share is how useful and important the family table is. And it doesn't even have to be the family. It can be friends. That's fine. It can be your pets. I have clients who eat with their pets, and that is great. But that idea of eating with people we like, eating with people we love, that is also good nutrition. And so not, getting so hyper focused on what we're eating, it is also important how we eat and when we eat with each other. So if right now the only thing you have access to do differently or to do quote unquote better is to just really be present when you're eating with other people, that's good nutrition too.
Yeah, I love that, because you took that whole thing out about what you're eating, and you're talking about how you're eating and who you're eating it with, because I think that helps a lot. Because obviously, if you're sitting down at a table with people you don't get along with, you're going to be stressed, and it's going to take out. Or if you're by yourself, even though some people may choose to eat by themselves
That's
because
fine.
they want that time off, but
Yeah.
to not have that engagement when you're sitting with the family. So I think that's really important, that we need to get back to the family table, like you said.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website, which is megbowmannutrition.com. And I'm also on Substack as Nutrition Needs Nuance.
I love that. I'm going to check you out on Substack. And also, where can you find your book, This Is Your Body on Trauma?
Yeah, so you can find it pretty much anywhere. It is certainly on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookseller. It's available.
And thank you so much, Meg, for coming on and for sharing This Is Your Body on Trauma. I mean, I literally, like I said, it's not one that you can read very quickly. You have to read and absorb the information and then go move on. I would just maybe taking a chapter or two at a time and just looking through it, because I think it's important that we really learn about our body, the trauma that we go through, our mental health, and connecting that two together, because it's going to make everybody feel better.
Absolutely.
So guys, if this show sparked something in you, please like, share, and review. I will put in the show notes everywhere you can find Meg, as well as where you can find her book. And until next time, bye. And thank you, Meg, for coming on and for sharing.
Thank you.